Daniel never planned to be near a royal palace on an alien world. He was only passing through the outer rim, searching for supplies and maybe a map that could guide him back to safer trade routes. His ship had been damaged in a meteor storm, and the planet below had seemed like the only choice. He landed expecting a quiet city with markets and kind strangers, but instead, he found a capital in chaos. Smoke rose above the shining towers. Alarm bells echoed across the streets, and crowds of alien citizens rushed away from the palace gates. Daniel had only wanted food and fuel, but instinct pulled him toward the danger. Something inside told him he could not walk away. The palace gardens were once beautiful, full of glowing flowers and tall crystal-like trees, but now the ground shook with distant blasts. Daniel moved quickly, keeping low as guards shouted orders in a language he barely understood. He thought about turning back, but then he saw her. A woman stood in the middle of the falling garden walls, trapped by broken stone beams. She was unlike anyone Daniel had ever seen. Tall, proud, with hair that shimmered like liquid silver, and eyes that burned with strength. Her long ceremonial cloak was torn, and her crown was cracked. She tried to push the heavy debris away, but her movements slowed, her strength fading. Daniel did not know who she was at first, only that she was in danger. Without thinking, he ran toward her. The ground split as another blast struck nearby, and dust filled the air. She looked up, startled, as the strange human reached her side. "Stay still," Daniel shouted, though he was unsure if she understood his words. He knelt and tried lifting the broken beam, but it was too heavy. He pressed his shoulder against it and pushed, muscles straining, but the stone refused to move. That was when he noticed her tail pinned beneath the rubble. He hesitated for only a second. On his world, such a thing would not matter, but here he did not know the meaning. Still, there was no other way. He reached down, grabbed the tail firmly, and pulled with all his strength. The woman cried out, a sharp sound that cut through the chaos. Daniel froze, worried he had hurt her, but the stone shifted at the same time. With one last pull, he dragged her free from the trap just as another section of the wall collapsed behind them. They tumbled to the ground together, coughing in the dust. Daniel looked at her, ready to explain or even apologize, but her expression stopped him. Her sharp eyes, glowing faintly in the smoke, did not show anger. Instead, they were fixed on him with a strange mixture of shock and something else he could not read. Before Daniel could speak, armored guards rushed in. They surrounded him instantly, weapons aimed at his chest. He raised his hands, heart racing, but the woman lifted her arm and shouted a command. The guards froze, their blades still raised, but they did not move closer. Slowly, the woman stood, brushing dust from her cloak. She was still staring at Daniel as if the chaos around them no longer mattered. Then she stepped closer, her voice calm yet strong. "This human saved me," she declared. Daniel understood only because the translation device on his wrist echoed the meaning into his ear. The guards looked at one another in confusion. Whispers spread quickly as more soldiers and attendants arrived. Daniel caught a few words repeated again and again: Empress. His chest tightened as the truth sank in. The woman he had dragged out from the rubble was no ordinary citizen. She was the ruler of this empire. Daniel's mind spun. He had only followed his instincts. He had never thought about royal laws or customs. He wondered if touching her tail had been a mistake, some kind of insult, but he could not take it back. The Empress stepped even closer until she stood only a breath away. Her silver hair shimmered in the smoke, and her eyes never left his. For a long moment, the entire palace courtyard seemed silent, as if all waited for her next command. Then she said in a steady voice, "Do not harm him. From this moment, he is under my protection." The guards lowered their weapons at once. Daniel lowered his hands but still felt every eye watching him. He wanted to explain himself, but words refused to come. He had no idea what he had just started, only that his life would never be the same again. Daniel followed the guards with heavy steps, unsure if he was walking into honor or punishment. The Empress walked beside him, her cloak torn and her crown cracked, yet she held herself tall as if nothing could touch her pride. Citizens lined the marble streets, whispering as the strange human and their ruler passed together. Inside the palace, light streamed down from crystal ceilings. The air smelled of incense, sharp and sweet, almost enough to hide the smoke drifting in from outside. Soldiers and attendants knelt as the Empress entered, but their eyes kept darting toward Daniel, the outsider who did not belong. At the center of the grand hall, the Empress turned to face her people. Her voice rang clear. She told them the human had pulled her from death when the walls of the garden fell. Murmurs spread quickly through the crowd. Some bowed deeper, as if thanking him, but others frowned in doubt. Daniel stood awkwardly, not knowing how to respond. He was not used to being the focus of so many eyes. He wanted to explain that he had only done what anyone would do, but before he could speak, the Empress raised her hand, silencing the room. She looked directly at Daniel. "What is your name, human?" The translation device on his wrist caught her words and carried them into his ears. Daniel cleared his throat. "Daniel," he said simply. The Empress repeated his name, her voice slow and careful, as if testing it. Then she nodded once. "Daniel. From this day, you will remain within these walls as my guest." The guards seemed uneasy. One of them stepped forward. "Your Majesty, with respect, this creature touched your tail. That act is forbidden by our law. He should be judged." Daniel's heart skipped. He had suspected as much. Touching her tail must have been a serious offense. He opened his mouth to explain, but the Empress raised her hand again. Her eyes narrowed at the guard. "He saved me when no one else could. He is not guilty. He is honored." The hall fell silent. The guard lowered his head and stepped back. Daniel could only stare at her, shocked. He had expected anger, but instead, she had defended him. Later, after the formal gathering ended, Daniel was led through the palace corridors. The walls glowed faintly with hidden crystals, and alien paintings stretched across the halls. Servants bowed to the Empress as she passed, but their eyes always slid toward Daniel with curiosity or suspicion. When they reached a quiet chamber, the Empress dismissed everyone else. She stood with him alone in a garden lit by silver lanterns. "You do not know our ways," she said calmly. "That is clear. But still, you acted with courage. You touched my tail to save me. Do you understand what that means among my people?" Daniel shook his head. "I only knew you were trapped. I didn't think about meaning. I just wanted you free." Her lips curved, almost a smile. "Among us, the tail is personal. No one may touch it without trust. For a stranger to do so is shocking. Yet you did, and you pulled me from death. That act cannot be forgotten." Daniel's chest tightened. He had worried he had insulted her, yet she spoke with warmth. "So, you're not angry?" he asked carefully. "I am not angry," she replied. Her voice softened, though her eyes stayed sharp. I am curious. I wish to know you better, Daniel. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. He was just a wanderer, not someone meant to stand in royal courts. I'm nobody special. I was only trying to help. The Empress tilted her head, studying him. To you, perhaps. But to me, you are the one who pulled me from darkness. You will not leave this palace until I decide otherwise. Daniel blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. What do you mean? She turned, her silver hair glinting under the lantern light. I mean that from this day, you walk with me. Wherever I go, you will follow, and wherever you go, I will be near. That is my choice. Daniel stood in stunned silence as she walked away, her steps graceful and unhurried. He could not believe what had just happened. He had come to this planet looking for fuel and food, yet now the Empress herself had bound him to her side. He did not know if this was honor or a trap, but he felt one thing clearly. His simple act of rescue had pulled him into a life he had never imagined. Daniel woke the next morning inside a palace chamber larger than any room he had ever seen. The bed was soft, the walls were carved with glowing patterns, and servants had left trays of fruit and warm bread. Yet he felt uneasy. He was not used to luxury. He was used to small ship cabins, grease-stained floors, and the hum of engines. He washed quickly and stepped into the corridor, hoping to walk alone for a while. The palace stretched endlessly, with high windows letting in golden light. Daniel thought maybe he could explore quietly and find a way back to his ship. But he did not get far. The sound of soft steps followed him. He turned and saw her. The Empress. She was walking just behind him, her silver hair falling over her shoulders, her cloak repaired overnight. She looked calm, but her eyes were fixed only on him. Daniel froze. Your Majesty. I was just walking, he said, unsure how to act. She nodded once. Then I walk with you. He tried again. I can go alone. You have duties. Important matters. Her gaze did not move. My duties are many, but today I choose this. Daniel felt his shoulders tighten. Everywhere he went, she followed. When he paused to study a painting of a star system, she stood beside him. When he looked through a window at the shining city below, she leaned near, watching with the same focus. Even when he sat to eat the fruit left for him, she stayed at the table, silent but present. Servants passing through the halls whispered to one another. Guards glanced at him with confusion. None dared question the Empress, but all could see she was keeping close to the human outsider. Daniel tried to keep calm. He thought maybe she would grow tired of it. Yet when he slipped outside into the gardens to breathe the fresh air, she was right behind him again. Finally, he stopped walking. Why are you following me everywhere? He asked carefully. The Empress looked at him, her eyes calm but steady. You saved me. That moment tied us together. I cannot ignore it. Daniel rubbed his forehead. I don't think it works that way. I didn't mean to tie anything. I only pulled you out of danger. Her lips curved slightly, though it was not quite a smile. To you, perhaps. But my people see what you did differently. They will say you reached for my spirit when you touched my tail. They will whisper that I chose you. I will not hide from them. Daniel's heart sank. He had not asked for this. He was just a traveler who wanted to repair his ship and move on. Yet now he was being pulled deeper into palace life. That evening, during a royal council meeting, Daniel saw how serious it had become. Advisors surrounded the Empress, bringing news of damaged trade routes and enemy movements. Their voices were tense, their faces stern. But even as they spoke, her eyes often drifted toward Daniel, who stood quietly in the corner. One advisor finally broke. "Your Majesty, forgive me, but the people are whispering. They say you let a human take the place of your guards. They say your heart is distracted. If you follow him, what will they think?" The Empress's voice turned cold. "They will think what I tell them to think. Daniel saved my life when others failed to reach me. His presence is not weakness. It is truth." The room fell silent. No one argued further. Yet Daniel could feel the weight of their stares. To them, he was not a hero. He was a question mark, a risk. Later, as they left the council chamber, Daniel tried again. "You don't have to do this. I don't want to cause trouble for you." The Empress shook her head. "You are not trouble. You are proof that fate moves in ways we do not plan. I will follow this path, even if the court resists." Daniel sighed. He had come here looking for fuel and a chance to leave quietly. Instead, he was now walking through royal halls with an empress at his side, her shadow never leaving his steps. He realized with unease that he could no longer call himself a visitor. Whether he wanted it or not, he was becoming part of her story. Days passed, and Daniel began to learn the rhythm of palace life. Servants moved through the halls with silent precision, guards trained in the courtyards, and advisors argued in council chambers. Yet no matter where he went, the Empress was there. At first, Daniel thought she followed out of gratitude. But slowly he began to notice something else in her eyes, something softer than duty. He tried to understand her people's ways. In the palace library, he studied old scrolls and digital records. Many spoke of tradition, of sacred customs. One passage stopped him cold. It said that when someone touched the tail of another, it was not a simple act. It meant sharing spirit and trust. Among rulers, it was almost never allowed. For Daniel, the meaning of that moment in the garden grew heavier. One afternoon, he sat with a palace servant named Lyra, who had been kind enough to explain things in simple words. She lowered her voice, glancing around to be sure no one else was near. "You must know," she whispered, "when you touched her tail, it was not just rescue. It was bond. To her people, such a thing is closer than family. Many believe it is fate." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "But I didn't know. I was only trying to save her. It wasn't a choice." Lyra shook her head. "The people don't care what you meant. They see what they believe. And she accepts it?" Daniel leaned back, troubled. He did not want to insult the Empress or her culture. At the same time, he felt trapped by meaning he had never chosen. That evening, the Empress invited him to walk in the palace garden. Lanterns glowed softly, and the air was filled with the scent of blossoms. She walked with calm grace, her cloak brushing the stone paths. "You read our history today," she said without looking at him. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. I'm trying to understand." Her eyes turned to him, sharp yet gentle. "And what did you find?" "That your people believe touching the tail is something deep. Something sacred," Daniel answered carefully. The Empress stopped beneath a crystal tree. Her silver hair caught the lantern light. "It is true. No one may touch it without trust. No one, except you." Daniel lowered his eyes. "I didn't mean to break your law. I didn't mean anything like that. I just wanted you safe." For a moment, She was silent. Then her voice softened. Do you think safety means nothing? Do you think pulling me from death is small? Daniel looked up, meeting her gaze. She was not angry. She looked almost vulnerable. I have always been Empress, she continued. My people see me as crown, as symbol, as untouchable. No one has ever held me as you did. No one dared. You did not see crown. You saw me. Her words sank deep. Daniel realized she was not simply grateful. She had felt something in that moment, something she could not ignore. Before Daniel could answer, shouts echoed across the garden. A group of nobles entered, their robes heavy with jewels. They bowed quickly, but their faces were hard. Your Majesty, one of them said firmly, we must speak. This human's presence causes unrest. The people whisper. They say you are bound to him. This cannot stand. The Empress straightened, her voice like steel. The whispers do not rule me. I rule them. The noble frowned. If you continue this, rivals will use it against you. They will call you weak. They will say you have lost to foreign hands. Daniel stood still, watching the tension rise. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but he knew his words would carry little weight. The Empress raised her chin. Let them say what they wish. I will not cast aside the one who saved me. If they see weakness, it is because they have no eyes for truth. The nobles bowed stiffly and left, their silence heavier than words. When they were gone, Daniel turned to her. They're right about one thing. If staying close to me puts you in danger, maybe I should leave. The Empress's eyes flashed. No. You will not leave. Danger does not drive me away. It only makes me stand firmer. If they test me, then I will show them strength. Daniel fell quiet. He realized then that his life was no longer only his own. His act of rescue had sparked a storm, and now he was standing in the center of it with the Empress at his side. The tension inside the palace grew heavier with each passing day. Whispers followed Daniel wherever he walked. Servants bowed to the Empress but stared at him with suspicion. Guards tightened their grips on their weapons when he passed. The bond between the human and their ruler had become the center of every conversation in the court. One morning, as the council gathered in the throne hall, a group of nobles stepped forward. Their voices carried strength, and their eyes burned with challenge. Your Majesty, one of them said, this cannot go on. The human has no place beside our throne. If you insist on keeping him close, let him prove he is worthy. Let him face the trial of loyalty. The room filled with murmurs. Daniel looked from face to face, unsure what they meant. He felt the Empress stiffen beside him. She did not answer at once, and that silence spoke volumes. Daniel leaned closer. What is this trial? He whispered. Her voice was low. It is a ceremonial test. Not of blood, but of spirit. They mean to break you, to show that you are unfit. Daniel squared his shoulders. If it proves them wrong, I'll do it. The Empress turned her eyes on him, filled with worry, yet she did not argue. Instead, she lifted her head and declared to the nobles, so be it. He will face your trial. That afternoon, Daniel was led into the great arena. The stands were full, not with cheering crowds but with silent watchers. Nobles, soldiers, and citizens all gathered to see if the human would stand or fall. The first challenge was a beast, unlike anything Daniel had faced. It resembled a scaled wolf with glowing eyes and claws like knives. The gates opened, and it lunged at him with a roar. Daniel had no weapon, only a staff handed to him by the guards. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to move. He sidestepped the first strike, then jabbed the staff into its side. The beast snarled, circling him again. Daniel fought not with brute strength but with quick thought. He remembered how wild creatures behaved on Earth. He feinted to the left, then struck when it turned its head. The staff cracked against its jaw, and the beast stumbled back. When it lunged once more, Daniel leapt aside, pushing the staff into the ground to vault over its back. The crowd gasped as he landed behind it and drove the staff down. The beast collapsed, dazed but alive. The second challenge tested his mind. Strange puzzles rose from the arena floor, glowing stones that shifted and clicked when touched. Symbols lit up in patterns he could not understand. Daniel frowned, kneeling to study them. He had always been better with machines than mysteries, but he remembered the Empress's earlier words about trust and spirit. He slowed his breathing, studied the patterns, and began to shift the stones carefully. The puzzle reacted to rhythm more than reason. He tapped each stone in a steady beat, like the hum of his ship's engine. Slowly, the symbols aligned, glowing brighter until the entire puzzle shone and then vanished into the floor. The arena filled with surprised whispers. The third challenge was endurance. Fire and wind surged across the arena as shifting platforms rose from the ground. Daniel had to cross them while flames leapt and storms howled. His body ached, his legs burned, and sweat poured down his face. More than once he nearly slipped, but he remembered the Empress's eyes watching him. He refused to fall. With every step, he pushed forward until he reached the end and dropped to his knees, exhausted but unbroken. Silence filled the arena. Then the Empress stood. Her voice carried across the chamber. "You see now. This human stands where others would fall. He faced your trial, and he did not break. He is not a threat. He is proof of courage." The nobles looked at one another. Some frowned, but many lowered their heads in reluctant respect. Daniel struggled to his feet, breathing hard. He had not thought of victory or honor. He had only wanted to show that he would not abandon the trust placed in him. As he left the arena, the Empress met him at the gate. Her silver hair glowed in the light, and her expression was fierce with pride. "You were never alone in there," she said quietly. "I stood with you in spirit." Daniel gave a tired smile. For the first time since arriving, he felt he had earned a place, even if it was not the place he had expected. The Empress stood at the edge of the great plaza where her people had gathered. The wide square was filled with banners and voices, yet she could not focus on the sight. Her golden eyes kept following one figure who stood at her side. The human. He did not dress in royal robes or fine armor. His clothing was simple, his hands scarred from work, yet he stood steady like a wall no storm could break. Lyra's generals were not pleased. They whispered that the Empress should not let a stranger walk so close to her throne. But she ignored them. She had seen with her own eyes what he had done. He had risked himself to save her life, and he did so without asking for reward. That act could not be erased by words. The crowd cheered as the Empress lifted her hand. She spoke of unity, of courage, and of standing together in times of danger. Her voice was strong, but inside her heart raced. She knew enemies still plotted in the shadows. She could feel them. Every time she looked at the human beside her, she felt both calmer and more nervous. Calm because he made her feel safe. Nervous because she feared what would happen if harm ever reached him. After the speech ended, the human walked with her through the palace halls. The air was quieter there, yet the sound of their footsteps echoed. He looked at her carefully, as if reading her thoughts. "You looked worried," he said gently. She hesitated before answering. "I fear the danger is not over. Saving me once does not end the threats. Someone still wants me gone. And if they cannot reach me, they may try to strike at those close to me." He understood what she meant. He nodded. "Then I will stay close. I gave my word that I will not let anything happen to you." Her tail flicked softly at the sound of his words. She did not know why that simple promise meant more to her than all the vows of her generals. Perhaps because his strength came from choice, not duty. Later that night, shadows moved through the palace. Hidden figures slipped past guards and reached the royal gardens. They carried strange devices, tools of silent destruction. Their plan was not to fight openly. They wished to end the Empress's life without warning. But the human had not slept. Something in his instincts told him the danger was near. He walked the garden paths and saw movement among the trees. Without hesitation he acted. He grabbed a torch from the wall and threw it, lighting up the darkness. The intruders were exposed. They tried to flee, but he gave chase. He was not as fast as them, but he knew the garden's paths from walking with the Empress. He cut them off and forced them toward the guards. Soon the palace rang with alarm bells, and soldiers rushed in. One of the attackers turned and pointed a blade at the human. The human did not step back. He raised a broken branch he had picked up and held it firm. His stance alone made the attacker hesitate. That moment was enough. Guards seized the enemy and dragged him down. When the danger passed, the Empress arrived. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with fire. She looked at the human and her voice shook. "You saved me again. Not only me, but my people too. If they had succeeded, chaos would have broken the empire." He shrugged softly, though his hands still trembled from the fight. "I only did what I could. I will always do what I can." The Empress stepped closer. She wanted to speak more but stopped herself. Around them, soldiers and servants stared with wide eyes. They had seen the human fight with nothing but courage and a broken branch. Respect spread through the crowd like fire through dry grass. That night, the palace whispered with new words. The Empress's protector, the human, was no longer seen as a stranger. He was seen as something far more. The morning sun poured golden light over the palace. Daniel stood in the courtyard, stretching after a long night of training with the Empress's guards. His body ached from yesterday's battle, but his mind was alert. The Empress approached quietly, her silver hair glowing in the sunlight. Her steps were light but purposeful, and her golden eyes held a softness Daniel had not seen before. "You rest well?" she asked, her voice calm yet full of meaning. "I slept enough to keep moving," Daniel replied with a small smile. "The palace is quieter than I expected in the morning." She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to calm the tension in his chest. "Quiet can be dangerous too. It allows hidden threats to move freely. But today, we have no such danger. Today, you can be at ease." Daniel felt a strange warmth in her words. For weeks he had worried about offending her, about failing her, about the endless whispers from the nobles. But now, seeing her stand calmly beside him, he understood something important. Her trust in him was complete. "You know," he said carefully, "I never expected to be in a palace, let alone beside an empress. I came here only to fix my ship and leave quietly." The Empress studied him, her expression unreadable at first. Then she stepped closer. You came here not for duty, not for reward, not even for glory. You came because it was right. That choice made you more than a visitor. It made you part of this empire's story. Daniel looked down at his hands. He had never felt like a hero. He had only acted on instinct and courage. Yet her words made him feel stronger than ever. Later, the Empress led him to the central plaza. The nobles and citizens had gathered, their faces showing respect and admiration. They bowed as she approached, but their eyes did not leave Daniel. The events of the past days, the trial, the battles, the courage he had shown had changed how they saw him. The Empress raised her hand, and the crowd fell silent. People of this empire, she began, you have seen courage and loyalty. You have seen a human who acted without fear, who risked himself to save me and our people. He stands with me not because he must, but because he chooses to. This is a bond no one can break. Daniel felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief. He had never imagined anyone would speak so highly of him, let alone in front of an entire empire. The Empress turned to him, her eyes shining. Daniel, from the moment you saved me, you became part of my life. You showed bravery and loyalty that even my strongest guards could not match. Today, I declare you my protector, my companion, and my chosen one. From this day forward, we walk together. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices filling the plaza with joy and approval. Daniel could hardly believe it. He glanced at the Empress, whose gaze was steady and full of trust. He realized that the moment he had grabbed her tail to save her life had created a bond far stronger than he could have imagined. He stepped forward and nodded. I will walk with you, Your Majesty. I will stand by your side as long as you allow me. Her hand brushed briefly against his arm, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. She did not need to say more. Daniel understood completely. Together, they had faced danger, trials, and challenges. Together, they had earned the respect of an entire empire. The Empress turned to the crowd, her voice carrying over the plaza. Let this day mark a new era. Let all know that courage is not measured by title or birth, but by the choices we make to protect and stand for what is right. Daniel felt the weight of her words. They were no longer just leader and visitor. They were allies, bound by trust, respect, and the moments that had tested their courage. He looked at the horizon and realized he had finally found a place where he belonged. The Empress walked beside him as they returned to the palace. Her tail swayed gently, brushing near him, a reminder of the bond that had begun in a single act of courage. Daniel walked with his head high, knowing that whatever challenges came next, he would face them together with her. For the first time since arriving on this alien world, Daniel felt truly at home.